your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Horoscope, and we have a treat for you in store this week. We have a really cool category, something I'm excited about. Our category is called All Hail Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell is well known, obviously, from the Evil Dead franchise and some other 80s B movies and into the 90s and some television career. He does some tours now. And I actually have, for our YouTube viewers, I'm showing a copy of his book, If Chins Could Kill, Confessions of a B-Movie Actor. And Matt, I just find Bruce Campbell to be one of the most entertaining people you could ever encounter.
Yeah, I agree. When I think of horror icons, outside of specific characters and directors, he's the first actor that comes to mind. I just think what he represents what's fun in horror movies.
Yeah, he's just everything he does is entertaining, and it's funny when you look at images of horror icons, they're usually the killers.
Right, like the characters.
We got Leatherface as an icon. We got Michael Myers. We have Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and we have Ash.
Yeah,
is an icon. He's the only he's like the one outside the box that has that iconic status without being the killer.
And I would say that outside the box is a great way to describe his career.
Very true. Yeah, very unique and different type of career. We're going to start by covering one of his lesser-known movies, at least not to the mainstream, a film called Bubba Ho-Tep from 2002, directed by Don Coscarelli, who was, of course, famous for the Phantasm series. And this movie is ridiculous. Is the first description that comes to mind. Had you seen this before, and what did you think when you watched this film?
I hadn't seen it before. I had walked past it in the video stores for years, and I just never watched it. But it's an absolutely goofy and ridiculous premise, and it somehow simultaneously has this like intimate, satirical, autobiographical narrative of an alternate version of Elvis. And I think it somehow plays like it has this like sentiment to it of aging, the social commentary on elderly people and aging, but also just ridiculously funny with all the classic Bruce Campbell one-liners in it.
Yeah, that's very well said. It's the concept is just ridiculous. As a lifelong Elvis fan, I gravitated towards it because it's just so crazy in its presentation. But the story basically starts at Shady Rest Retirement Home in Texas, and there's an old man there, Bruce Campbell, in what I would call really good old man Elvis makeup. He's got the hair, he's got the sideburns, he's got the glasses, and unfortunately, he has a growth on his pecker, which is a real difficult subject for him, being stuck in a bed in a nursing home. Yeah. And we see his roommate die. And we cut to an old woman in the nursing home, and she sees this strange beetle, this scarab creature, and it gets under her covers and bites her. It chews at her, and she's bleeding. She falls onto the floor, and we get to see our best described as a cowboy skeleton mummy.
Yeah, it's like exactly. Yeah, ancient Egyptian mummy with cowboy gear on.
Yeah, and the Elvis character wakes to see her in his doorway screaming, and then she's pulled down the hallway. And the next day, the roommate's daughter, the roommate who passed away, shows up, and she is throwing his things away disrespectfully, and just she throws away his purple heart. And it touches on some of that sentiment you mentioned, where she never visited. She dropped him off there, was there, a couple years, they mentioned, and she's just throwing his stuff away. Like, and you talk about that ageism and that growing old and your value to society. It touches on a lot of those things in a deeper level than you would think from this ridiculous slapstick movie.
Yeah, and they do it through one of the most playboyish icons of all time, like Elvis Presley. And so, like, what would alternate version Elvis Presley be acting like or thinking if he was in an elderly home all alone?
Yeah, the nurse comes in, and this is the opportunity he gets to tell the nurse and the daughter of his roommate his story about how he wanted a break from the fame, which is true. As an Elvis fan, Elvis was always felt oppressed by his fame, and he wanted a break. So he found a really good impersonator, and they switched places. And the impersonator overdosed and died, and now no one believes him. Now
Which
he's
is
stuck.
great for the It's great for the Elvis lore because of all the Elvis impersonators, and there was many people who developed conspiracies that Elvis never died.
Yeah, there were sightings all over in the
Right.
70s and 80s. I remember, but no, of course, nobody believes him, right? Except for his friend Jack, who claims to be JFK, that he didn't die and he was put there by the KGB and the CIA or whomever, and he sells this premise that he's really JFK, except he's black. Which
and Elvis is like, but you're white, and he's like, I know, that's how good they are.
Just taking the ridiculous to another level.
Yeah.
Elvis discovers this same beetle, and it flies at him and attacks him, and he catches it in his bedpan and then stabs it with his dinner fork and fries it on an electric heater. And he goes to visit Jack and tells him what happens, and Jack says he saw the mummy. And they throw all these little tidbits from these real characters in there. He mentions that he thought it was Johnson or Castro came to finish him off, but when he came to, it was actually the mummy.
Yeah, he's like, you could never kill Johnson, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. The nurse comes in and gives him an ointment and gives him a treatment on his pecker growth, and he gets excited for the first time in many, many years, which is a very funny scene.
Yeah.
The nurse goes out and she's taking a break outside, a smoke break, and there's all kind of funny blue electrical pulses coming from the shed outside that nobody uses. And we kind of figure out this is where the mummy is holed up. And that night, Jack shows Elvis some Egyptian hieroglyphics that were carved into the bathroom wall. And he's figured out that the mummy is there sucking souls out of the elderly people in the home. And of course, Elvis thinks he's crazy. Nobody believes Elvis's story, but he doesn't really believe JFK's story either. So
right, the whole thing's ridiculous. And I love the dialogue in this movie because it hits this Monty Python level. And he was like, why would he be in the bathroom? And he was like, because he digests souls. He has to get rid of.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing, they're having this like logical conversation of why a ghost would be in the bathroom, and I couldn't stop laughing.
Yes. You digest the soul, obviously you have
Right.
to crap. So yeah, it's crazy. But Elvis doesn't believe him, but when he leaves and goes out in the hall, he actually sees the mummy. And one of the elderly residents comes out in the hallway, sees the mummy, and has a heart attack. This man was in his underwear wearing fake pistols.
Yeah, cap guns.
Yeah, like he was going to go face off the mummy like that. And he has a heart attack and passes. But his soul does not get taken by the mummy because he passed in his own terms. As the mummy walks by, Elvis has visions, and he sees kind of the history of the mummy and sees how he got mummified and entombed years ago. He sees that he was on tour with a traveling museum display, and he sees a bus accident where the mummy's entombment fell into the water near the nursing home. So he sees all this in a vision. So now he believes, and Elvis and JFK, the two old men, prepare for battle. And it's another humorous scene as they get all their stuff ready. And JFK comes out dressed in a fine suit. He looks fantastic. and Elvis is wearing one of his famous jumpsuits.
Yeah.
And then they proceed. JFK gets in a motorized wheelchair, and Elvis grabs his walker, and they head out. It's like you said, the word ridiculous just keeps coming to mind, but I can't help but laugh and smile throughout this whole movie.
And then throughout the entire movie, they have this very like Lone Rider Western melancholic soundtrack that's like serious. Like it's almost like the movie takes itself serious on one end as far as like the social commentary and then also it just has this ridiculous premise it just keeps leaning into.
Yeah, it leans, and all the actors lean, and I will talk about that at the end because that is one of the highlights for sure. They go outside in the courtyard to face off against the mummy, and the mummy is coming towards Elvis, but then he disappears. He reappears behind him and attacks him. And JFK rides over, and it's so funny. He's in a hurry, and he puts the wheelchair in, and it just doesn't go that fast. And this action moment where he's really got to, and then it's just slowed down by the wheelchair. And it's just funny all over again.
Yeah.
He rides over and distracts the mummy before it can steal Elvis's soul. Then the mummy turns and attacks JFK, flies at him, and knocks him out of his chair. And the motorized chair keeps rolling over and ends up rolling over to Elvis, who gets in it and rolls back to continue the fight. He douses the mummy with gas that they had brought and lights him up. And JFK succumbs to his injuries from getting knocked out of the chair, and he dies. But his soul was saved and never taken by the mummy. And it's kind of it's a little bit of a touching moment, even in the middle of this ecstasy.
Yeah, they have their moment where like he's like lying down. He has the go get him Gipper kind of like scene with him where he's just he's kind of like thanking him.
Yeah, and so JFK dies once again. Forget November '63.
Right
now he's really gone.
Yeah.
The burnt mummy rises, and Elvis charges, and they tangle, and they're fighting, and they end up tumbling down a huge hill towards the river. And the mummy seems to be getting the best of Elvis. On the fall down, he gets a deep, deep cut into his abdomen. Doesn't look good. The mummy is now punching him, because that's how a mummy would attack. They're fighting like they're in the UFC. But he manages
for a heel lock.
Yeah, Elvis manages to dump the entire gas can, and it's all pooling around, and he manages to light it. And now the mummy's completely engulfed in flames, even more than before.
The only thing better than fire is more fire.
Yeah, it didn't kill him the first time, but this was more fire.
Yeah.
And the mummy staggers and falls into the river, and we see the pieces of him float away, all disconnected. So we believe the mummy is now finally gone. But Elvis is severely injured from the encounter. He knows he's going to die. He's laying there, and he sees the stars in the sky form a message that says all is well. And of course he says, thank you very much. And Elvis exits the building for the last time. And that's the movie.
Yeah.
And again, it's silly, it's goofy, it's ridiculous, but it is funny. It makes you laugh a lot.
And it's one of the best Elvis impersonations in film I've ever seen. But
I've read various things that say that, and I'm not gonna sit here and say Bruce Campbell's the greatest actor that ever lived, that he should have 10 Academy Awards.
Right.
But he commits to this role. And no matter how goofy the situation, I don't think anybody else could have carried this movie and done the amazing job that he did.
Yeah, and not only that, but what a perfect movie, because they play into all the karate. He does all the karate moves, and it's an action movie.
Yes,
for all intents and purposes. So like he does all like the karate action moves, and they just kind of does it over the top and silly.
Yeah, offset by that, when he goes down to do the chop, he can't get back up because his back hurts and his knees hurt.
Yeah.
He's perfect. He really is perfect in this movie. And Ozzie Davis plays JFK. He's also terrific. It's basically it's basically a two-man show, as the couple bit characters thrown in here and there. But
it's like grumpy old men. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Grumpy old famous men who are fighting a mummy.
And he does Bruce Campbell, I heard. I haven't seen the DVD, but apparently he does the commentary for the DVD in the character of Elvis.
Okay, I have it, but I've not watched the commentary. I should have done that.
Yep.
And you mentioned this, but beneath the juvenile bathroom and dick humor, there is a deeper commentary on the trappings of fame, ageism, your sense of worth and dignity that should be paid to the elderly. It really puts that in there. It doesn't throw it in your face, but you can't help but get that message as well, that these people, despite their age, have something to offer the world.
Yeah, and he also brings up like a lot of like he talks about regret and like there's always hope and never fulfillment, and he talks about how he kind of misses Priscilla and like what it'd be like if she was around, and like he just keeps dropping. There's like little nuggets that he has throughout his dialogue where it's just you can feel like there's a sense of remorse for this character.
Yeah, very true. They talk about his daughter, and who tragically passed away within the last year, so kind of comes a little full circle there. But yeah, it's not a movie for everyone. It's goofy enough, silly enough, and fun enough that I think it's great.
Yeah, it has great pacing. It's just fun throughout the entire movie.
Hail to the king, baby.
Okay, and in our Bruce Campbell episode, now we are going to move on to Evil Dead Rise, where Bruce served as executive producer, and obviously is the face and one of the originators of the franchise. Not an actor in this film, but still very relevant into making this happen. At this point, since it's a fairly new movie, if if we're going to give away a little bit of a spoiler here, if you want to pause us, so you want to run out and go see the movie real quick and come back to us, that's fine. I will give you a moment to do that, but we're going to get right into it. What'd you think of this movie, Matt?
It surpassed my expectations, and I had some pretty high expectations for it just based off the teaser trailer that I saw. And I was like, oh, I don't even have to see anything else about this movie. I'm 100% going to see this. And Alyssa Sutherland did one of the best jobs for, I should say, like a Deadite, one of the best, bad guys that I've seen in a long time. Like there's no growling and grunting. Like she actually gives a Deadite character, and I think she knocked it out of the park.
Yes, and the introduction of, the cast is basically two adult females and kids, and some things they did that I really love. They tried to do something new. They tried to take the history of mythology and be true to it, but they gave it a new setting. They changed, they introduced kids into the mix, which is always harrowing.
Different. Yeah.
And they even tried some different types of demons later on in the movie that, whether you liked it or didn't like that switch, they tried to be different, and I thought they succeeded very well. Our opening scene, we start in the woods, which is very familiar, and there's a great aerial shot, reminiscent of the classic, high-speed Sam Raimi tracking through the woods shot. Going down a stream, it turns out it's a drone, so they kind of pull like a switch on you at the beginning.
Yeah, which is good because that's that scene where they have that part of the Evil Dead is like just iconic from the very first one. How they would have like originally they used to use ropes. They'd have a camera on a rope. And that was like very iconic that they created it. So it was great when they started the movie off with that, and then they kind of switched on you, like I said, and it's just the drone.
Yeah, they change it up, and there's a cabin in the woods, but it's much nicer than the cabin we're used to seeing. And we see a girl is possessed by one of the Deadites. She's a demon, and she has in what may be. I asked my wife what she thought. This was my vote for the coolest effect of the entire movie. She grabs her by her side ponytail and rips her scalp off.
Yeah,
which was just. What a way to open a movie. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah. I thought the same exact thing. It was just like they just go for it. Like she just like pulls her head right off, and like she's just screaming. It's like, well, I didn't see it coming. I always thought it was gonna be like a stab or a grab or a throw, and it was great.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's definitely different. She then goes outside and chops the boy up with the blades of the drone, and there's a huge cloud of bloody water. It looks like a Jaws movie at this point. And then the title comes up out of the water, Evil Dead Rise.
Yeah, one of the
And
best reveal scenes for a title.
yeah, it was cool between the directed by and all the titles that are brought forward through the drone shot, and then the title coming up at the end. It was a really cool opening scene, and then it goes 24 hours earlier, and our story really doesn't have anything to do with these characters we just saw, other than a brief tie back at the end.
I believe what it was. Maybe we'll get to this later, but I think it's an opening for something else.
Yeah. But our primary story is Beth is visiting her sister Ellie. They've kind of grown apart. Beth didn't know that Ellie was now a single mom, that her husband had left, and Ellie calls Beth a groupie. She's a traveling guitar technician, and she kind of demeans her by insulting her job and thinking she's just out there traveling with this band for no purpose whatsoever. And you get a little sense of the bad blood between them. She's telling Ellie, geez, I didn't know. And Ellie's like, yeah, well, I called you twice, 2 months ago, and you never returned my calls. So there's some friction there.
Yeah, they're definitely the original Evil Dead's where it's just like a group of friends. Now it's more like modern day. It's kind of a lower class, middle class, like a lower middle class family, single parent family struggling to hold it together. You can kind of tell because like the daughter kind of scoffs at the mom. Then the two sisters, the aunt and the mom, they kind of have like a little thing going on between them. And the son's just kind of in his room listening to music, just wants to be left alone like a rebellious teen. So you can see that they're all just trying to like hang in like by a thread. But there's still love there.
Yeah, and this all takes place in a condemned apartment building, further adding to the struggling family vibe, where they have to be out within 30 days because the building's going to be torn down.
And it's very rainy outside. It's the whole cinematography is dark and goopy.
Yes, good word. Yes. The kids are Danny, Bridget, and Cassie. Danny's the oldest boy. Bridget's the middle girl, and Cassie's the very young girl that you see in the preview in the trailer. And they're sent to get pizza. And as they come back, an earthquake hits, and this rundown, condemned apartment building does not hold up well. The parking garage cracks open, and Danny finds an old album, an old actual record player type of album, and an old book in a hole that forms in the floor of the parking garage. And of course, we know what the book is. We've seen this. The album was new. So he brings it back. And of course, like you said, he's in his room listening to music all the time anyways. He plays the album, and there's a priest recording who recites the incantations from the book. Yep. And similar to the old reel-to-reel tape that Ash plays in the original.
Yep, or the second one when he finds the recording in the beginning.
Yep. These spoken words. The 2012 remake. One of the characters speak the words, but they go back and forth. In this case, it's recorded on this album, and of course, the Deadites are unleashed in the building. At this point, the power goes out. And Ellie, their mom, is trapped in the elevator. And in a cool scene, reminiscent of the vines in the woods from the previous versions of Evil Dead, she is taken in the elevator and wrapped by what appears to be elevator cables or power cables. And she's similarly, held up against her will and overcome by the power being a Deadite. She gets back to the apartment. She vomits up this clear goop that goes like buckets.
Yeah.
And she collapses and appears to be dead. So now we have the sister and the kids going through a mourning process. in the middle of this power outage, in the middle of this rainstorm. Just not a good situation.
Very claustrophobic.
Yeah, and there's a couple neighbors who try to help out, but you feel for these kids. They're like just their father just left within the last couple months.
Yep.
No idea where he is, and now they believe their mother's dead. And it turns out they would have been lucky if their mother was dead because she's worse.
Yeah, it turns into a visceral nightmare from here.
She comes to and she attacks the family and she injures the middle child Bridget where she's going at her eye with a tattoo needle, and she doesn't get the eye. They spared you on this one, Matt.
They spared me on this one.
But she digs into her face around the eye, and she's all cut up. And they manage to get her locked out of the apartment, where she takes the hallway as a place to kill all those neighbors, the supporting cast we thought we might have had. You know, they're toast.
Yeah, they're just cattle. And not only is she like physically like terrorizing, but she's also like psychologically terrorizing because she's very like has this like Joker-esque whimsical way of tormenting people like psychologically, where she has this like constant grin on her face and she's just toying with everyone.
Yeah, the other thing I like that they did in that same vein was in the past we've seen, they're people and then they're deadites, and she appeared to be as a person and then she got taken over, but her deadite transformation continued throughout the movie. She looked less and less human as it went on and more like a demon. It wasn't all at once. There was a gradual, evolution to her look, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, that was a great part of the detail and the transformation, like you said. And Alyssa Sutherland in an interview said that she took inspiration for this role from Jim Carrey's The Mask, because she wanted the deadite to have some kind of character and just be ridiculous, which I thought was and I thought that was a very interesting choice.
Yeah, it's the deadite with the most personality that's been shown in the series for sure.
Yeah,
and she says some hideous things to her kids, and she says some creepy things throughout the movie.
Very demented.
Beth goes into the kitchen and finds Bridget crouching on the counter, and you hear her chewing something, and she is biting off and chewing a wine glass, she says she's trying to kill the maggots inside of her.
Yeah, in her tummy, like she's acting like a little 10-year-old, 12-year-old.
Yeah. And at one point she does expel something onto the counter, and it's moving and wiggling and squishy and not nice.
Yeah.
And then she gets overcome and she attacks Beth. And in kind of an infamous scene that I kept reading about before I saw the movie, Beth tries to get away and she grabs off the counter a cheese grater and goes down the back of her leg with it, which certainly not the grossest effect, but very unique and very cool. And they made her leg with, the perfect circles that you would get from
that you would get like as if you were like grating a lemon, like getting lemon zest.
On a bigger scale,
more painful scale. Yeah.
And so Bridget then goes and attacks Danny and Cassie, and Cassie has this device she created with a doll head on a stick, and it got broken early in the movie.
The rifle on the wall.
Yeah. And there's another one too, but she holds it up to protect herself, and in doing so impales her sister through the mouth, through the back of the head, which of course that's not enough to take out a deadite, but they able to get her tied to the bed. At this point, Danny informs Beth about the book and the album, and they listen for answers. And there was multiple albums. The second one, they hear the priest talking, and this is actually one priest is in the background. You can hear him telling everybody what a bad idea is and not to do it.
Yeah,
there's our hero Bruce Campbell actually is the voice of that priest. So that's how he kind of slips into the movie here.
Oh, that's cool.
Which I thought was cool too. Yeah. Bridget awakens and kills Danny, but in the process, he sets her on fire. So now we just have, we just really have the two people left. We have Beth and the young Cassie. But Ellie has managed to crawl through the vents and gets into the room again, and she attacks Beth. But Cassie is hidden under the bed. And at the beginning, when she cut the doll's head off, her mother said, "Did you have my scissors again?" And she slid them under the bed. And there's the other Chekhov's gun, because she's hiding under the bed, and her aunt's getting attacked by the demon. Sure enough, she slides her the scissors. And another cool scene, Beth the scissors are split, and she impales it straight up through her nose into her brain, which manages to give her enough time to get away. That was also a cool.
It was
attack.
very cool. Yeah. But it's not enough.
It's not enough. No. Beth and Cassie do escape into the hallway, where the bodies of the people that she had killed, Ellie had killed, are reanimated. And now they're all chanting "Dead by Dawn, Dead by Dawn," in a throwback to Evil Dead 2, which I thought was, every time I see these things, I love the little nods to the history.
You looked at all the little Easter eggs that they throw in there.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of them. At this point, Ellie, Danny, and Bridget, who were all at one point or another taken over by the Deadites, they come into the hallway and they start to merge into one creature. They start sticking arms and legs up through the bodies of the others, and they really morph into this this giant multi-limbed, multi-headed demon,
which is prophesized in the book in the very beginning.
Yes,
when they're flipping through, because I was trying to catch all the different ones. I was like, all right, which ones are we going to see?
Yeah. Yep. And so again, that's something different. That's something unique to this movie that they hadn't done before.
It kind of reminded me of the second one with the big monster, the big head monster at the end. Like, I think they were kind of like, let's have a big monster at the end. Let's have it transform into something more demonic.
Yeah.
Kind of like a final boss kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's got shades of, melting creatures from like The Thing. It's got all kinds of influences, but creates certainly a different demon than just a plain Deadite.
Yep.
They make it into the elevator, which floods with blood before breaking the cables, and the whole elevator falls and crashes into the parking garage. And they come tumbling out, and then there's this Shining-esque.
I was gonna say, it was like a homage to Shining, like
very much so.
Just the way it was shot, like it has that still look, and the doors just burst open and the blood comes everywhere.
Blood comes pouring out, and very much a nod there. They get chased by the creature into the garage. They're hiding a little bit, but this garage is going to be under construction. They find two things of great relevance: a chainsaw and a wood chipper. And in this case, the Deadites get control of the chainsaw, and they're about to kill Cassie. But Beth saves her by pushing them into the wood chipper. And, once the wood chipper gets a hold of you, you can't pull yourself out of it. So it's slowly pulling them all in, and it's just spraying blood and chunks of carnage all through the parking garage. It's an absolute mess.
Yeah, Beth is just covered in it, like Carrie style.
Yeah, and they managed to. She managed to. All that's left is her sister's head, and she kicks it straight into the wood chipper, and it sprays out.
Yeah,
and basically that's the end of the Deadites, is, or so we believe. Next morning, a girl comes out, and she's on the phone, and she's heading to a cabin with friends, and she's the girl from the opening. And we see her looking at all the blood and the carnage, and then we get the camera shots of the old camera shots of the Deadites moving in on her.
Yeah,
and we hear the sound, and we know why she was a Deadite when she got to the cabin.
Right. Yeah, it brings it all full circle.
I had super high expectations for this movie, and I was not disappointed.
No.
There's some great Easter eggs in here. There's some great nods to movies of the past, and there's also some tremendous originality that I thought was very cool.
It's a fun, bloodbath-soaked, nightmarish lullaby of death and damnation for the whole family.
For the whole family, yeah. Yeah, I like that the nods that I noticed, and I'm sure there were more, but obviously the chanting Dead by Dawn. When Ellie kills one person in the hallway, their eyeball flies straight out and down the throat of another person, which is
who also had his eye taken out. Oh no, that was never mind. That was something else.
Yeah, which is an awesome throwback to when the girl swallowed the eye. Beth, when she's in the parking garage, she says, "Come get some," which is a very much an Ash quote. The chainsaw, of course, is just a standard throughout the movies.
Yeah.
And one thing that there was no end scene after post-credit scene, but there is, and this is something that is in all the movies, the sound of the buzzing fly, and it's in the movie. And it's also at the end of the credits. But they do such an unbelievable job with that. It's hard to imagine how creepy they can make the single sound of a buzzing fly sound. But it instantly brings up images of carnage and rot and disgustingness.
Death and decay. Yeah.
It's really cool. That buzzing fly sound is.
Yeah, it's one of those minimalist approach that I love in horror movies, where they can just do something simple like that and just kind of like tease your brain with all those images.
Yeah. So some cool quotes in the movie, mostly from Ellie as a deadite demon. But she tells her kids when they don't know she's changed yet, but she goes in to cook in the crazed egg scene.
Yeah.
She says, "I'm finally rid of you titty-sucking parasites," which is just like, wow.
The most ruthless nightmare stuff that you could imagine a parent saying.
Yes.
Just says the most cruel things.
And when the little girl, Cassie, is looking, she has to climb up because she's small, and she's looking out the peephole when she's locked in the hallway. And she's like, "Mommy, you don't look so good." And she says in her deadite voice, "Mommy's with the maggots now."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, for this poor little girl.
The way they had she went from like regular mom's sweet voice to like demonic voice fluctuations, like back and forth, I thought were just incredible.
Yeah. Very good movie. And it got me thinking, and certainly this is a subject we can get into at another date, but I kind of believe Evil Dead may be the best franchise in horror. And I say that because there's not a bad entry in The Thing.
You know what? I agree. I think you could nominate it for that. It goes from like a serious movie, then they have fun with it satirically, and then they make it serious again, and they can kind of go back and forth with it. So it has a lot of like wiggle room as far as like how it gets narrated in the future.
Yeah, whether you prefer the straight horror or you prefer the comedy or you prefer the craziness of Army of Darkness, or the modern telling with the straight horror, whatever your preference is, there's not a bad movie in the whole lot. And it's hard to say that about any other franchise.
Yeah, it's one of the best, and it's one of the most iconic as well. I mean, all hail Bruce Campbell. Here we are talking about like what a franchise he started and has gone on for 40 years now.
Yeah, over 40. Yeah, we're at 42 years since the first one, which is unbelievable.
And these movies do a rare thing. They've gotten better. Like a lot of movies, they kind of like 10 Fast and Furious movies, and it's like they just like this kind of things get milked, they get worse. We've seen that with like Jason movies. Like they start, then they kind of just get worse, and these movies have just gotten better.
Yeah, certainly. They certainly haven't diminished. I still think probably the '81 original is probably my favorite, but they're great, and they've modernized without losing the quality.
I think saying modernized is a better way. I shouldn't say better. I should say they've modernized properly.
So many movies that have tried to modernize. the remake, and we're gonna talk about some remakes here in a few weeks, but the remake of Friday the 13th, terrible.
Yeah.
Remake of Nightmare on Elm Street,
Nightmare on Elm Street,
terrible.
terrible. Yeah.
Remake of Psycho, pointless and terrible.
Yeah.
Like when people try to modernize these classic movies, they fail miserably for the most part. And the Evil Dead franchise has not. They're rolling, and who knows? With the success of this one, I'm sure there'll be more.
Yeah, I think with the ending they had, well, the beginning and ending, the way they brought the movie into fruition towards the end, I think that's an opening for an Evil Dead universe. Where they could just, now it's opened out into the world, because they never brought it back. Like it stayed out into the woods. Like no one's like concealed it. No one sent it back to hell. It's out there.
And there's
I think
at least, I'm sorry, in the movies historically, there's at least 3 different versions of the book out there that all release a different demon. So
right.
The options are endless. I just hope they don't ever, the day they start not being very good, they got to stop. Don't ruin a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Just leave it alone. And it's funny, we talk about like how they're, that there's comedy in these movies in the first 3. But like this movie, as dark as it was, and like even involving children and a family, as evil as Elle's character is, like she's actually playful and funny in that own right. Like she has a lot of like one-liners where it's almost like she's like being playful, like I said, like almost like a Joker-esque. So there's humor in that. It's very dark humor, but she's like doing a lot of like, she's laughing herself, like she's having a good time. She's laughing, like she's kind of making all these dark jokes about her family, and it's messed up, and you're kind of like watching it through your hands, but it's a dark sense of humor.
Yeah. All right. Well, excellent. So all hail Bruce Campbell. I think we can all agree on that. One of the best icons of film and television, and an entertaining guy, whatever he does. And these were 2 really enjoyable movies. I love this category. I have the book. Obviously, he's one of my personal favorites. So category very much enjoyed, and hopefully you did as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone go see Evil Dead Rise. It's a great movie.
Absolutely. That's our show for this week. We are the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jerry.
Groovy. Your Weekly Horoscope with Jerry and Matt.